Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 22 going with today's Third Age Thursday, a time for us to revisit familiar and not so familiar stories of the Third Age. Now today, even though we finished the material on Durin's Folk in Appendix A3, we're still sticking with the Dwarves as we go to Unfinished Tales and read about the Quest of Erebor. After all, we read a little bit about this in Let Me Explain. No, there is no time. Let me sum up fashion in the appendices, so let's go and read a bit more in Unfinished Tales. But first, let's look at the frame narrative for this. Christopher Tolkien explains that Gandalf is telling the story to Frodo, Pippin, Merry, and Gimli in Minas Tirith sometime after the coronation of Aragorn as King Elessar. So the he in the opening paragraph is Gandalf, the we is the hobbits and Gimli, and the I, when it's not Gandalf talking, is Frodo, who was apparently taking really good notes. He would say no more that day, but later we brought the matter up again, and he told us the whole strange story, how he came to arrange the journey to Erebor, why he thought of Bilbo, and how he persuaded the proud Thorin Oakenshield to take him into his company. I cannot remember all the tale now, but we gathered that to begin with, Gandalf was thinking only of the defense of the West against the Shadow.
"I was very troubled at that time," he said, "for Saruman was hindering all my plans. I knew that Sauron had arisen again, and would soon declare himself, and I knew that he was preparing for a great war. How would he begin? Would he try first to reoccupy Mordor, or would he first attack the chief strongholds of his enemies? I thought then, and I am sure now, that to attack Lorien and Rivendell as soon as he was strong enough was his original plan. It would have been a much better plan for him, and much worse for us. You may think that Rivendell was out of his reach, but I did not think so. The state of things in the north was very bad. The kingdom under the mountain and the strong men of Dale were no more. To resist any force that Sauron might send to regain the northern passes and the mountains and the old lands of Angmar, there were only the dwarves of the Iron Hills, and behind them lay a desolation and a dragon. The dragon Sauron might use with terrible effect. Often I said to myself, I must find some means of dealing with Smaug, but a direct stroke against Dol Guldur is needed still more. We must disturb Sauron's plans. I must make the council see that. Those were my dark thoughts as I jogged along the road. I was tired, and I was going to the Shire for a short rest, after being away from it for more than 20 years. I thought that if I put them out of my mind for a while, I might perhaps find some way of dealing with these troubles. And so I did indeed, though I was not allowed to put them out of my mind. But just as I was nearing Bree, I was overtaken by Thorin Oakenshield, who lived then in exile beyond the northwestern borders of the Shire. To my surprise, he spoke to me, and it was at that moment that the tide began to turn. He was troubled too, so troubled that he actually asked for my advice. So I went with him to his halls in the Blue Mountains, and I listened to his long tale. I soon understood that his heart was hot with brooding on his wrongs and the loss of the treasure of his forefathers, and burdened, too, with the duty of revenge upon Smaug that he had inherited. Dwarves take such duties very seriously. I promised to help him, if I could. I was as eager as he was to see the end of Smaug, but Thorin was all for plans of battle and war, as if he were really King Thorin II, and I could see no hope in that. So I left him and went off to the Shire and picked up the threads of news. It was a strange business. I did no more than follow the lead of chance, and made many mistakes on the way. Somehow I had been attracted by Bilbo long before, as a child and a young hobbit. He had not quite come of age when I had last seen him. He had stayed in my mind ever since, with his eagerness and his bright eyes and his love of tales and his questions about the wide world outside the Shire. As soon as I entered the Shire, I heard news of him. He was getting talked about, it seemed. Both his parents had died early for Shire folk, at about 80, and he had never married. He was already growing a bit queer, they said, and went off for days by himself. He could be seen talking to strangers, even dwarves.
Even dwarves, Gandalf says. Now, in this version of the tale, we get Gandalf's very specific viewpoint and concerns. This is, in a way, an expanded version of just a few paragraphs from the appendices, as we see the strategies and chess moves that Gandalf has to consider behind the scenes. Saruman's hindrance of his own plans, Sauron's preparation for war, what Gandalf thought Sauron's first moves would be. In fact, what he says here about Sauron attacking Lorien and Rivendell first would have made sense indeed. But thanks to the Quest of Erebor, the destruction of Smaug was achieved and the Dwarven kingdom reestablished, providing a defense against Sauron should he attack in the north. We also get a closer look at what transpired when Gandalf went with Thorin to the Blue Mountains, Thorin brooding on his wrongs and burdened with the duty of revenge, a duty that we are told that dwarves take very seriously. And then we get that little teaser about a hobbit named Bilbo. More on him and how he fits into Gandalf's plans next week. For now, though, that wraps it up for this week's Third Age Thursday. Come back next week as we continue the Quest of Erebor. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. Join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as I welcome another special guest for Fandom Friday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. If you're listening to it on a podcast app, please follow or subscribe. And follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.